Welcome to In Conversation with Rachel Edwards. We are absolutely thrilled to have her here. And as way of introduction, Rachel is an author and a writer. And today we're going to be talking all about storytelling and finding your authentic voice, amongst many other things, I'm sure, as part of the conversation. So welcome, Rachel. Thank you
for having me. Delighted to be here.
Thank you so much for being part of our Women in the Arts series, which is discussions and conversations with women doing wonderful things in the arts. And I think at this time it's really actually important to elevate that conversation and that noise, isn't it? Because people are, freelancers particularly are struggling in this whole year. So I think literature, on the flip side of that, is obviously flourishing in terms of books and so that'll be an interesting conversation to have as well. So Rachel is an award-winning novelist. You're also a writer, so we've really enjoyed reading your Sunday Times column that you had, which is really interesting. Obviously, it's fascinating to talk to you about your journey from writing your first novel, Dazzling, last year, which did really, really well, and then talking about your new novel, Lucky, that's coming out next year, which I can't wait to talk to you about. So let's kick off, I think, in terms of lockdown. I mean, it's strange, it's sort of like the elephant in the room, isn't it? How are you finding it? How is it as a writer in lockdown? Is it really good? You just get time to do loads of things?
Well, absolutely is. It's, as we know, this year has thrown all kinds of challenges to all of us. And lockdown number 2 is going well, thank you, so far. So, how it is, as long as everyone's in good health, that's great. Yeah. Family are well. Creatively, it's been a really interesting time, actually, because I think lots of people say to me, oh, you must be writing loads. And to a certain extent, that is true. I think Martin Amis was in the press recently. I don't always see eye to eye with him on everything he says, but it was true. I think we said that writers are the least inconvenient species on earth by this pandemic, which sounds like it could be smug, but actually it's true, because my day-to-day has not changed that much. Part of that's to do with having children of a certain age. I was 23, but also the fact that most days I'm there with my laptop in various rooms around the house writing. But the real challenge, I suppose, has been, as for most of us, with worrying about how we're feeling ourselves, in terms of health and how we're feeling emotionally. So whilst I have the time and space to create, I haven't always felt that motivated because so much in the world has been going on. But I can't complain, all is well. And yeah, certainly be writing the final edits of Lucky, which I've really enjoyed, actually.
Can't wait. I just finished Rachel's first novel, Dazzling, and I can't wait to talk to her about it. If you haven't read it, we will talk about it in a little bit, and you definitely should. It's great. It's great. There's great characters in there. Have you learned any new skills in lockdown? I mean, I literally I don't think learned any new skills. Have you done anything differently? Because you're in the countryside, aren't you? So you have lovely gardens and things.
We are, yeah, absolutely. We are in a little hamlet by the Thames, out between Oxford and Henley. So yeah, we're in the countryside. I think new skills, well, there's lots more, Zooming. We're all doing much more online than we did. Even with me, I think that one of the first things I had to do was have to do radio interviews, some of them down the line anyway. But when I did my first Woman's Hour last year with Jenny Murray interviewing me, that was very exciting because that's, in the studio. And I had to talk about Dazzling, and that was with headphones at home, and suddenly you had to be a bit more tech savvy than I've ever been. So, there's certain things that we've all adapted to. But essentially, new skills, I don't know, I think just, getting up upping my Zoom game a bit. But apart from that, pretty much.
Yeah, I forgot about the IT skills. Obviously, we're all IT gurus now, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly.
So let's find out a little bit more about you, Rachel, because tell us a little bit about your career background, and because I think it's really fascinating to understand actually when you become a sort of best-selling author, what the journey is to get to that from your perspective. And obviously you won an arts prize as well as part of that journey, and you're obviously regularly write for leading titles like The Guardian and obviously a lot of magazines and things. So tell us a little bit about your career background. It'd be really fascinating to understand that.
Sure. Well, my going right back, originally I felt that I wanted to be a novelist as an author from a young age, I reckon about 7. I didn't think I could be, but I thought that would be my dream job from a very young age. And my parents wanted me to go into law, actually. My father was a doctor and my mother was a nurse, and they thought you have a reliable profession, and a lawyer will be a decent thing to be, and as it is, I'm sure. But I knew my heart was in literature, so I filled out my initial university form to study French with English law, and actually I ripped it up and I just changed it. I thought I'll read French with English. I didn't think I can get away with just English, because my father, strict Nigerian father, he'd be like, well, you really speak English, what are you talking about, so I took that path. And that point where it changed, I thought I made a practical commitment to go the literary route rather than another way. And I still had options. I could have gone to teaching and so on. At that stage, I realized that I knew more than anything I was to write. And after graduation, I took some low-level jobs in publishing, just so I could, but I wrote it in the evenings. I was, doing very tenuously linked to publishing jobs, so a scientific publisher, nothing to do with novels, but I felt that somehow I was connected to the book world, even though I was just down in customer services somewhere, and I was writing away, working on a novel. And then in my early 20s, I had started to write, I'd attempted a full-length piece of work, a novel, and I sent it off to the Arts Council as was, and they had an award, and it was a national prize, and they awarded me that amongst along with two other people. And the upshot was that it gave me enough money to buy a laptop as opposed to a PC that I'd be using probably for my landlady or something. And also I had some mentoring lessons from Catherine Johnson. She's a fantastic writer. She writes mainly YA, but she's written screenplays, and she's very established. She's written lots of books. And that was my first contact with a working writer, and she's a woman of colour as well. I'm still friends with her to this day, actually, which is fantastic. We meet up now and again. And that inspired me to say, this is possible, And through that period, I thought, okay, the next stage is to get to writing for a living. That's when I stopped being a hobby or a sort of passion into what I do. And so it was kind of, I was putting my hand, but it was kind of like that. It wasn't that overnight that I was, discovered. I did get an agent, but it took time and it took shifting. And by my late 20s, I was freelancing and getting the majority of my income from writing all kinds of things. And that's when I thought, okay, I can do this. And then much later, when my stepchildren, who I raised full time, my twins, when they went to university, only then did I actually write Dazzling. So it's been a long trajectory.
Yeah.
But a really rewarding one.
Have you, it's interesting you talk about mentoring, because I do think that is massive, isn't it? To have that. Well, obviously winning the prize probably gave you confidence, I presume, at that point, to feel like you can do it. Because do you find with writing, more than anything, maybe art is the same in terms of painting, is you've got to find a confidence within you?
Absolutely, it's so important, and there's different levels of that confidence as well. So it can be while you're still finding your own voice, and that's another discussion we can have down the line, but while you're still finding yourself as an artist or a writer, it helps to have others who've gone before you and to say, this is possible. I mean, that was a huge thing for me, because whilst my parents, they've invested a lot in education and so on, but I hadn't met an author until that point. Catherine Johnson was the first author I met, and there were these rarefied species to me. I didn't think it's something that a girl like me would do. I thought I needed to have a job which had a 9-to-5 passive income, and that's what I should be aiming for, even though my deep passion was to be an author, and that's how I felt I was. So knowing that it's possible, knowing that it's doable, is a huge part of that journey. And mentoring as well can help you crystallize your own commitment to your craft or art or whatever it is you want to do. You say, okay, how committed I am to this? What am I prepared to sacrifice and give towards becoming this? So maybe a question, I thought, okay, now I know it can be done. How am I going to make it happen? So that was a turning point for me.
You talked about, you touched on the fact that obviously you've always written, so you still write articles as well as writing novels. How different is that process? Because obviously the journey's taken a long time, and you obviously mentioned about, when you're a mother, and sometimes when the kids get older, you actually have that time to sort of release more talent and more abilities. But in terms of writing novels versus writing, is the craft the same? I mean, forgive my ignorance in terms of being a writer, but it's all storytelling, isn't it? I mean, you write so wonderfully in the Sunday Times magazine. I've loved that, and especially that. We'll talk about that in a sec. I want everyone to know about that story about how you won that money, because that's brilliant. But the craft of that, it's interesting to understand that when you write a novel, it must be massive in terms of actually structuring that versus when you're writing a piece that's commissioned.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is overlap, but they are different different skill sets. And I suppose, you know, you say writing a novel, it becomes and evolves. If it's going well, it becomes more of an art. And writing articles, maybe more of a craft, but there's lots of overlap and both have different elements in them. What I would say in terms of the process is that with an article, you start with, you know, have an idea, and then you might think of interesting anecdotes to illustrate that idea, and you might think of you know, you hope to bring light and colour to the turn of phrase, but it's 700 words. My Sunday Times column was a page, and that's concise, and I'd turn it around in a few days because it's a weekly thing. And that's exciting, and it's fun, and it's snappy, it's a great way to work. And that's something, to be able to do that, is something I honed through the freelance journalism, having to, or freelance writing rather, having to, you know, turn around things quickly, but also to bring a voice of a sort to it, and lots of different types of registers of writing as well. That helps you when you're writing a full-length piece of work, which is a very different experience, because with a novel, you often live with it for certainly at least a year, at the least often, many years sometimes. I mean, this novel, lucky my second novel, it was an idea I had way before Dazzling. So I've lived with this idea for years and visited it in different incarnations. But again, you do start, there are parallels with an article, because you start with a big idea, and then maybe you find characters rather than anecdotes, and characters and flesh them out to illustrate that idea and storyline, and then another storyline. But with a novel, you would draft for draft, and the difference is between, you know, 700 words around that of concise, punchy language, and 70 to 80,000 words that you absolutely inhabit, and it's all-consuming. It's a very different experience, but there are transferable skills to writing articles, certainly to writing a novel, and it helps that you to be able to do both. I think, you know, whether it's finding every sentence, giving every sentence meaning. I try and do that in my novels as well as my articles. Yeah.
Tell everyone that story about Deal or No Deal, because that is just brilliant. I love it. There's a lot about your character as well, because I think that's really lovely about interviewing authors, is that you're hidden behind the words, aren't you? And actually, when you see authors interviewed, you get to find out their true personality. So I think it's wonderful to. So tell us about the. Yeah, I won't say any more. Tell us about Deal or No Deal, because it's a great story.
I'm so glad you like that story, because you know, I forgot about it for a while, and I suddenly thought, oh, actually, it's a column. It's quite interesting. So I was in my late 20s, and as you know now, it's difficult to get the housing ladder for young people. But even back in the day when I was in my 20s, it wasn't easy necessarily, and I was never.
I didn't find it easy back in the day. Exactly. You know, it wasn't that easy.
And it was never that easy, was it? And I was not necessarily the best at saving money. I wasn't, you know, I'd always been employed. I'd always worked, but you know, life was for living, and I thought, well, something will work out. Got to the point though, in my late 20s, I thought, actually, do you know what? I really want to get a flat. I need my own place. I've moved around Oxfordshire, some lovely little places, but renting. And I thought I need a bit more security, get to that point. So I was just started this new job at a women's magazine that I don't know if remember, it's Vanilla magazine. I worked there for a while, and I went to Google and I thought Win TV. I put in Win TV Cash. I thought that's it. That's the only way I can save up for a deposit. I can't. I just need to win it. So I was asked to audition for a new game show, got on it, and it turned out it was Deal or No Deal. So I was the fourth ever contestant in Deal or No Deal, and long story short, I won £25,000, and that was the deposit for my first flat.
Unbelievable. I think that is one of the best anecdotes I've ever heard. In fact, I've never met anyone before who's actually won money on a game show. Like, not like
I didn't watch game shows before. I haven't really watched, but it was just that one of those things that I'm so glad I did, is you just take a chance. And again, you know, I think that's part of when I look at lucky this novel. I think I have got a bit of a chancer side in me. That doesn't hurt when you're a novice, for example, and also just risking things not working out. You know, when you send off your umpteenth draft to an agent, you need to think that things might not work out, but they just might. You have to take a chance, you know.
We touched before about writing and obviously, you know, being authentic and understanding about, you know, and having confidence as well.
Yeah.
Where do you start with that in terms of finding your own voice when you're writing a novel? Is it very much like crafting any art in that it takes a bit of time to navigate that and to find that?
I think time is certainly a key element of it. I mean, I was always a very keen reader. I think that's important for anyone who wants to write seriously. I mean, you know, there's different degrees of writing, but if you want to write passionately, seriously, and in fiction, I think you need to always have read widely and eclectically and discover what you don't like and what you do like. And then the way that time is essential here is not that you read and read and think, oh, I want to write like that person, because you know we all want to write like some people, but it never works out that way. You can't be done. You only write like yourself. But what can happen is that these layers of learning and experience through other people's books, the mulch down, like layers, you know, like autumn leaves out in my garden, like that, it mulches down to something else, and it fertilizes your own art. And so something over time, and only time can do this, will emerge after your experience. And it might just be reading lots of books as well, but taking, it could be your experience of music or your love of nature or your relationship with your children. All these things will feed into who you are as a person and your art. That's often why it takes time for some kind of handful, love or desire or ability to write to emerge, because all these things feed into a really original voice. And it also, then you have to take risks. You have to experiment and risk getting it wrong. And, you know, the delete button is our friend. You have to write and write and write, and your voice will emerge almost like, you know, chipping away at something, and it'll come through. And there's no guarantee, you know, but I think the more you write, a voice will emerge, and then you can hone that as you go, and it might mature and evolve in itself. So it fascinates me because I still don't quite know how it happened, but at some point, certainly with Darling, my voice came out, and it came out quite strongly. I think for me, I felt it is quite a visceral experience.
It does, and I think it must be like songwriting. Some part of it is just a little bit of magic sprinkled in.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean,
I do think that some of it can't be analysed.
Yeah.
It's like you say, you craft, and I think that's one thing to teach children, isn't it? Now that things do take time, and actually you do hone a craft. It's not, some things don't come so easy, and actually writing, and like you say, why is it so important, do you think, as an author, to read a lot and to immerse yourself? Why is that important in storytelling?
Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so
a little bit of feedback, actually. I don't know whether it's on
sorry,
you.
is that
Here, that's all right. Maybe just adjust it. That's perfect. I'm sure that's better.
Okay. No, I think it's incredibly important because until you read a wide range of voices, and you experience that and see how books make you feel in different ways, and know things you don't like, as well as things you absolutely love, things that transport you, you don't know what writing can be and what it is and what you can be to it. I think that's the truth of it. That's the best way I can put it, is that, you know, you have to, there's so many different types of writing, and no two authors are the same. Some seem similar, but everything has something different to offer. And it gives you confidence as well as a someone who wants to write and create their own fiction. Until you really get travel through a world of literature, and it could be, much as I say, my degree is in French and English. So I was lucky enough to be able to read some of the French authors in their original language. So again, it's not exclusive to contemporary English writers or women or black women or anything like that. You've got to read widely and know what you don't want to write as well as what you do want to write. And then it can feed into your creative energy, you know. And again, there's no exact science to it. But the more you read, it can only help. I would caveat that with when I'm writing, when I'm really immersed in my own characters, and writing my own book, I don't then take on a whole load of other voices, because that just gets like a cacophony in my head, and I have to clear the decks, you know, and leave my space for my own voice to come through. So I try and push back. I don't read as much when I'm really working in the furnace of working on the novel, because otherwise it confuses me. And also, you want to, if it's good writing, you want to pick up, you know, imitate without meaning to. I don't want to do that ever. So I just push all other writing aside when I'm writing my own book.
Yeah, that must be quite hard if there's an author you love the style of. It's kind of like to actually just create your own. Why did you want to write Darling? I got it here. And it is fabulous. If anyone's, you know, do read it. So it's a great read. Tell us why you wanted to write Darling. How did you get to that point, and the story around it for anyone that hasn't read it?
Yes. So Darling, in a nutshell, is a story of a black British woman, Darling White, and her relationship with her white English stepdaughter, Lola. And it's set at the time of the EU referendum. And it's you find out quite early on, it's a deadly relationship. You don't know why or how. And the reason I wanted to write it, there are many fold really, but the first instance, Darling came to me. I wanted to write about the Black British experience, and not in a direct way, not in a regurgitation of what I've experienced. It's very far from anything I've experienced directly. But I wanted to write a Black British character. At the time, we don't want to, but we cast our minds back to how polarised the country was over the in-out Brexit situation. I wanted to write a family that's a microcosm of that, and that's essentially what the Darling White Lola family is. Now, I had this character in mind, but as a daughter of immigrants, my mother's Jamaican, my late father was Nigerian. But I was born here. I was born in Cornwall, of all places. Grew up in Hertfordshire, University of London. So I'm British born, but it suddenly struck me at that time in 2016 when I was writing, it had never been more of a key point, more significant to be a second generation immigrant. So I thought of this character, I thought, but what's her story? Why does it matter? This Black British woman, yes, and so what? And then we had the Brexit vote. However anyone voted, it was a momentous time. I remember watching it all night and emailing my agent at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was like, holy hell, we're out, and being really shocked. And Britain to me, and I have a certain prism that I look through it at, looked different to me. And then coming on from that, I experienced something like I might talk through about in my local town, and there's an incident that made me think, okay, something might have changed here, and I wanted to write about the national psyche through the prism of a family, a fictional family. That's why it's the push me, pull you tension, and a heightened tension, a deadly tension between Lola and Darling.
How much do you think your own journey and ethnicity and background comes into what you want to write about, but also how you write as an author? Do you think it has I mean, it obviously has a part to play, but in terms of the characters you want to tell or the stories that you want to tell?
Again, that's a really, really good question, because it's changed for me. That I would have answered that probably differently 10 years ago. So originally I thought, well, in essence, I'm many things. I'm a woman, I am a black woman, I'm British, I'm this and that. I'm an author, or a writer, or at the time would-be author. But I always thought there's a certain purity of storytelling that I didn't want to necessarily be buffeted around by my own personal thoughts about race and identity. So I thought my early attempts at writing didn't necessarily touch on race at all. They were about ideas, and that was, as I saw it, transcended racial difference and so on. But the world has changed, and actually I realised that now, and certainly when I was writing, there were very few, and still are, but at the time even fewer, Black British female authors out there. It's an unusual thing to be, and this is pre-Bernardine Evaristo winning the Booker. So I wrote Darling in 2016, and I suddenly realised that actually, if I, the Toni Morrison quote, there's a story you haven't read, you need to go and write it, or thereabouts, paraphrasing. But I kind of absolutely took that to heart. I thought, I'm not reading stories that reflect how I'm feeling at the moment. I want to be an author. I have to write the story. And Darling surprised me, because I'm, we've met. I'm quite a sunny, optimistic person, and it's dark and twisted. I'm not dark and twisted. But the things I would explore needed to be explored in that dark and twisted way. I say it signifies what was going on with the country at that time, rather than what's going on in my life or my psyche. But I felt that in terms of race, absolutely now is an opportunity, it's a privilege, and it's a platform that I wouldn't have thought about 5, 10 years ago, because I think if not me and others like me, who's going to write that? Now, the Black British fiction is certainly, it's been there for years with Andrea Levy and writers going back before that, but only now is it being recognised in much more the mainstream. And so I feel a responsibility, without being too grandiose about it, to contribute to that, and an opportunity to, and I'm honoured to be able to shape what Black British fiction can be and can become. So whereas before I felt it might be a constraint on me or too much of a waiting in terms of race, now I don't feel that way at all. I feel it's an opportunity, and I feel it's the right thing for me to, and why I want to write them at the moment.
Is that a joyous place to be, in the sense of actually to feel that you absolutely should be talking about race and identity, and that actually it's an important conversation that is being had and should have been had all the time around that? Is that, what has changed that in terms of literature as well? Is it certain people opening the doors to that? Is it, like you say, around actually how we feel about where we live and our ethnicity? And, you know, is it many factors within literature specifically?
Yes, it is many factors. I think that first of all, there's a general cultural greater visibility that seeps in, yes, in literature, but certainly before that, you think about who comes to our living rooms on TV, more Black actors, you know, gradually coming to what people say is a mainstream. I have this very bitter conversation saying, well, you know, we are the mainstream, and Bernadette Everest is there as well, saying the same thing, and Mary Blackman, people have been there for years, Dorothy Coomson, they've always been there. But there's been greater recognition recently, and I think it's been waves. It's been a wave. I mean, when I was first signed up, for the same, my publisher have always been quite forward-thinking, very forward-thinking in terms of wanting to hear underrepresented voices, as they termed it, and putting out a prize for fame writers and so on. But since that time, things have really snowballed, and I think with a number of writers having successes. If you look at Queenie, Candice Carter-Williams, and then if you look at, certainly, but again, Bernadette Everest, who I mentioned, obviously she's the book winner, and her Girl, Woman, Other is phenomenal. That has changed the perception. And then this year in itself, I mean, it's only 2 years since Dazzling came out, even though I wrote it in 2016. So much has changed since I wrote it. And with the Black Lives Matter movement and what happened there, there's been a sudden wave of recognition, and people saying, I want to diversify my reading, you know, in touch with me saying, I want to read wider than this. I don't want to have a narrow range of books. People who really passionately care, who may not have been engaged that way before, but always didn't know a way into it. And literature is a way into other worlds, as we know, whether it's about race or gender or whatever. So it's been incredibly important to see lots of different facets of our society moving forward to make literature more diverse. And I've seen it happening, you know, in real time before my eyes, and with writers I know, and everyone being positioned, perceived differently than even 2 or 3 years ago. It's extraordinary, actually.
It is extraordinary, and I think also it opens up, as you know, speaking from my own personal experience, you realise how closed your box was in the sense of what you read, and you know, you had certain art that you appreciated, but perhaps it wasn't as diverse as perhaps it could be, and especially bringing up children as well about diversifying. We always went to art galleries. I always appreciated a wide cultural range of art, but perhaps not quite as much as I could have done. And I think it's the same with literature, and actually who you choose to read.
Yeah, but I think absolutely, and you say who you choose to read, but I think you have, obviously, I think, you know, knowing you have a very open mind, you're very open to very diverse ideas and diverse influences, but also who gets to the gatekeepers, you know, who is out there for you to read. It's like, because I think, actually, in my childhood, how did I ever read one single book with a Black girl in it? I don't think I did, which for me, I'm getting emotional. I think, oh my goodness, that's actually quite shocking. I mean, I know it's a different time, it's a world where I'm, you know, in my 40s, it's a long time ago, but actually that's extraordinary. I never read, not until I was 14, did I read Maya Angelou, I Know Where a Caged Bird Sings, and I hadn't read a book written by any Black person until that point, but I'd never read a childhood book, a children's book with a Black character in it, ever. So I grew up with that perspective, and that's not saying everyone's wrong or being racist. It wasn't. I wasn't exposed to that. It may have been out there. Certainly, maybe African American literature would have had something to offer, but certainly in children's literature here wouldn't have had that. So I do realise that representation and seeing yourself reflected back is so important. And again, I'm not a children's writer at all, but I do embrace the fact that right at the bottom, right at the grassroots with children's reading, there's a movement to also have more representation there. Because I think, had there been more books published by really good quality Black authors, I have no doubt that you and me and others would have read them, but they weren't out there. We didn't see them on the shelves of bookstores at the time we were growing up. It just wasn't there.
We definitely, I mean, I come from a very liberal household, and we definitely would have. And I think perhaps now there's a responsibility, because it is available, to actually educate yourself into, what's your view on Black History Month? Because I've read contradictory things, not in terms of from your perspective, but some people are positive about it and some people are not, in the sense of.
Well, so for the past, since it's being published, from that first year, the October, there are things I was asked to do for Black History Month, and I was very proud and pleased to be able to do that. I thought, this is great, it's a celebration, because I can, I'm not making myself sound ancient, but I can certainly remember a time where no one cared about that, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah, totally.
It wasn't a thing. The fact that it became a thing, so I'm like, okay, well, let's embrace this, and then let's analyse it later, but let's just go for it. And then that's moved on since then. But people think, well, we don't want to also, whilst I do embrace it as a whole. However, I also smiled at Mary Blackman's tweet the other day. She's saying, just to let, publicists and journalists know that I am available other months apart from Black History Month, because to be honest, October's a very busy month for me, and I'm not complaining, but it's actually great to have, it's not something that we can talk about diversity and we talk about issues of race all year round. Black history is part, in this country certainly, and in America, but it's intertwined with all our history. So and if you read David Olusogun in his fantastic Black and British history, you go back, it goes back centuries. It's not something that's a little niche thing to be crammed into 1 month a year. So I do see that perspective as well. But let's not knock people over the head for trying to do the right thing. I think actually, yeah, it can start with a month, but then it introduces people to diverse reading, think about other ideas, and it becomes part of the broader spectrum. So while I don't think it's by any means it should be confined to 1 month, I do think it's a way in for people to have a greater appreciation of what's out there and what is relevant all year round.
Yeah, and I think if you walk into a bookshop now, in the last 12, I mean, obviously we haven't been able to walk into many recent times, but I think we'd find it's a very different space than it was 2 years ago, in terms of the type of authors that are there, in terms of actually just the sectioning of where it should be. I've noticed that actually in the summer when we were allowed to come in, and I think that can only be a positive, can't it, in the sense of, let's not celebrate, but as you say, actually just increase the number and the diversity throughout the year that you're doing it. But it is good to celebrate so many things, isn't it, in one set time? I think that's...
You're right. You're absolutely right. Because also it just enriches all of us. It's not just Black people who benefit from this. We all benefit from it. Because in the way that, and this is, historically, a country where Black people are a minority still, I happen to be someone who've read all Shakespeare's works. And Shakespeare enriches everyone. Just says great writers of whatever race enrich everyone, and great literature enriches everyone. And it transcends race. It's great art, but also having other stories is part of the human experience. Is why literature exists in the first place. Having stories that we can all share and be able to put yourself in entirely other shoes, whether it's in terms of other genders, or whether it's in terms of other races or other ages, or even intergalactic things are into that. It's just having that opportunity. That's a great thing that literature affords us that no other art does. So we need to embrace that and not close ourselves down to being narrow in it, because it's a great enrichment of our own experience while we're here. So let's do it.
And also sort of two things there. One is, it leads me on to my next question, which is about, who you enjoy to read, and perhaps, giving us the opportunity to, share some great authors that you enjoy or books that you enjoy. But also it's so important now that you were saying about, leading ourselves into a different place, into different stories. You know, it's a tough old time at the moment, isn't it, for us? And I think there's such an important place for books and novels that can transcend where we're at into a, even it could be more uplifting space, it could be a thriller, it could be something that have you spoken to other authors about this time and the fact that it's been a bumper in terms of actually sales, but also just, you know, the fact that people want to read more and escape?
Absolutely, yeah, because you know, even before the virus hit and before Brexit, people talk about people look at different things in books. Obviously, there's a move towards uplift, and there probably still is. But people need things to lift them, as well as to challenge them, as well as to make them think about difficult, thorny issues. So we need and deserve to have literature that offers us all kinds of opportunities. And at this time, it's a really tough time. So I know I for a fact have written, lucky, my second novel differently. It's impossible not to be impacted by these times, and I think that the messages that you can transmit in your books, and they need to respond to the times and the need really. So I think that yeah, it's a huge opportunity to look at how we can feed our collective need for stories in different ways. Um, but you asked about which authors that I've been reading, is that right? And who I've been.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to know who inspires you, who you enjoy as well to read as an author, because it's, you know the craft it takes as well as enjoying it just as a sort of normal, regular person reading it.
Yeah. Well, I've been lucky in the past few years to be sent, you know, some fantastic books to get sent proofs and so on. And but there's some standout books that have been game changers for me. There's a lot of fantastic writing out there, but game changers historically, I mean, you go back to someone and it's impossible as a black British woman not to have been influenced by what Zadie Smith did so long ago with White Teeth and think, oh wow, this is, you know, this is fresh and new and it's actually saying something that hasn't been said before, and that in itself is a great thing. And I've mentioned Bernardine Everest a few times, but not least because I know we're friendly on social media, and I've read Girl, Woman, Other, was absolutely blown away with it.
I loved it as well.
It's amazing, isn't it amazing? Yeah. And I was actually blown away the fact she read Darling, Bernardine read Darling, and she named it on Woman's Hours one of her top 3 lockdown reads.
That's right. I mean, that must be just wonderful.
That was so fantastic.
Really respect her as well, to have that feedback back. The respect back must be lovely.
She is so supportive of other writers as well, and not just black women, but there's a lot of writers who says, you know, she's out there, she's really working, and it's her moment because she's won the Booker, but she's also promoting lots of other writing and lots of other issues and supporting people. So that's great. So yes, as an author, she inspires me, but certainly her writing, just purely her writing alone, I think it's phenomenal. Then apart from that, you know, it's not about black women, all about black women. George Saunders, have you read Lincoln and the Bardo?
No.
I would highly recommend it. Honestly,
Write it down.
That is an extraordinary book. It's so unlike anything I've read before and since. And that was, I believe, won the book a few years ago. And it's just such a yes, I can't. Words fail me. you have to.
Oh, I can't wait. Oh,
Lincoln and the Loss of His Son. It's just extraordinary. And I've never read anything like that. I've mentioned also, you know, back to more typical influences, Maya Angelou, because that's the first time I read it. But I didn't even know that black women not could write and they were able to, but were permitted to write. I didn't think it was something one did. I think you had to have a job that would, you know, pay the bills and keep your head down and don't make a fuss and don't get above yourself type thing without being, you know, overstating it. But I thought that was, you know, that showy, flamboyant, wonderful burst of life-affirming writing in I Know What a Caged Bird Sings. Oh my goodness, that woman lived a life. And she, to me, and I think of the poem Still I Rise, and that still inspires me. So she's another one. And of course, the late, great Toni Morrison, with her legacy, you know, will last forever. And Beloved, particularly, is a book that I need to read again, actually. I read it once or twice, but it's...
I've read it. It's hard. I find, as a mother now, I find things heart-wrenching. I'm so emotional. I think I struggle with some stories.
Yeah. I that's really interesting. And honestly, you say so, because I think sometimes it almost feels too much. Because I remember at one point, when I was first published, I get not my publisher, but various publishers, I get some slavery, some very good slavery literature. But sometimes it's just almost too much, it's too heartbreaking, or anything with children, and it's just absolutely can destroy you, can't it? So
I struggle with dramas now as well. I've talked about this before. Every drama is about children and something happening to them. And I've always loved, a really fantastic drama on the telly. And now I'm just like, I have to wait till they're older. I think I'll catch up when they're older.
It's not about raising children. So I think I can, I can write pretty much anything these days. Even,
yeah, but that's a good thing. I think it's important.
Oh, you have £10,000 for your new flat. Like, oh!
I know, but I think something wonderful about being, what was it? I think Jennifer Aniston calls herself a leaker, which is just cry. I'm definitely someone.
I cry daily, yeah.
So female literature just feels to me, maybe as a woman, is just exploded. And is it the same thing we were talking about, diversity of novels, in the sense of there's an equality that's come in as well, in that people are talking about women authors? They've always been there, and maybe we're just seeing more of them, and there's more noise and more space and more of a platform for it. Or are there more women writers? What do you think?
I think both. I think there are more women writers, but I think also women's writing has been respected on a platform as never before. It used to be, in my teens, I remember thinking serious writers were men's writers, and there's this whole talk of the chick lit. Women's writers were for women, and men didn't.
Highly dismissive, wasn't it? It felt that way.
Highly dismissive, and it was and then you've got, but you look at some of the absolute behemoths of literature. Look at Hilary Mantel, who I'm very proud to say is at my publisher, Fourth Estate, and and the people like that, and A.S. Bias and Bernadine, and you look at so many, and also not just the great prize winners and the real giants, but also those who are writing extraordinary literature. And just coming through, like Sophie McIntosh, The Water Cure, and people who are coming through original, interesting ideas. And also, I think what's changed is that we used to talk about writing about the domestic sphere, apart from a very few female writers, was always seen as, that chick-lit thing, that thing for women. Now, whereas men wrote about their day-to-day lives, it could be seen as very intense and brooding about the human condition. And I think that's the difference. And actually, women's experience is also part of the human condition. That is now recognised in a way that hasn't been done before. And I think that's part of it is a cultural shift, but part of it is, women authors and writers and playwrights as well, and musicians and poets, all kind of creative people knocking that door and saying, hello, our experience matters as much as yours. So it's not about, women's experience and then the real stuff. It's actually about bringing it all to the table, and ideas, great ideas and great experiences, and conveying those in a way that is extraordinary and dazzling and meaningful is the province of both men and women.
Do I think of just listening to you there, and I think the word dazzling is just such a wonderful word. I don't think we actually use it enough, and I think women authors are dazzling. I think, I've been reading more and more, and I was so annoyed with myself that I got out of the habit of reading books and novels and intelligent sort of essays for many years, and I think I just kind of got a bit lazy, I think. And actually, it's important to kind of read and not just read short copy. I mean, it's so hard, isn't it, with social media? I think your brain is so quick to kind of get bored and wants to leap on all the time that you have to retrain a little bit.
That's true, and we all have shorter attention spans than we did, don't we? We all have our phones, even watching a film, you start tapping a phone and all this, and jumping from idea to idea. And when you watch an old film, for example, with another medium, you look at how slow and lingering the shots are. I think we always just absorb ourselves. And you read literature, there's probably 100 years ago, you had long passages of description, actually it's quite beautiful and rewarding. Now, my editor wouldn't start that for a second now. We're like, chop, chop, chop. So we've moved faster. We all move faster through our days. And yet, taking the time to absorb ourselves in art is so important. And as you say, read essays. I've just written an essay about mental health for someone. And I think it's just reading all kinds of ideas, find the time to that. And obviously you've got young children. It's not always easy to find the time, but to do that is so rewarding and so nourishing.
I think it's important actually to remember that we don't watch a huge amount of telly, but actually, just stop and read something.
Mm-hmm.
And essays is quite a good place if you want to get back into sort of retraining your brain to actually read proper novels again. I wanted to ask you about Lucky, your new novel that's coming out. When is it out next year, and what can you tell us?
Oh, lovely. Well, I'm full of Lucky at the moment because that's what I've been doing my final edits on over lockdown. So Lucky is out on the 24th of June next year, and the cover reveal, and I'll be sending you a little directly, Lizzie. But the cover reveal will be the end of this month. So Lucky is a story that's evolved through me for some years actually, and it's really, really close to my heart. The story of Etta, who's a lady in her mid-30s, and she's keen to nudge her loving but commitment-phobic partner, Ola, into marriage. Now, that sounds like it might be the story of a love affair. It's not about that at all. What it is about Etta looking at her position in life and trying to see how she can move it on. And she actually gets drawn, she tries to save money because they're trying to buy a house. And she goes online and she gets drawn into the world of online gambling. Yes, absolutely. So it's about the higher level idea is about the risks we all take to survive. It looks also at the movement of people about and migration. It looks at the Windrush scandal, race and hope and got twisted in it. Yeah, it's a bit of a mismatch of a book, but it really looks at the risks we all take to survive and what the definition of luck and what that means. So but it does take down the world of online gambling, which I think is quite a pernicious world and hasn't really been covered that much in literature. And apparently it's been a big problem for people during lockdown as well. So I thought 2 years ago. So those things.
It sounds brilliant. Having read your first novel, I can't wait till it comes out. I watched a documentary on online gambling probably last year, and it is really scary. I mean, it's incredibly powerful and destructive for people's lives.
It is. I think it's the way I look at it is, but it's something that you look 10 years ago, you don't see all these ads for gambling. It comes with bingo, it's all friendly, happy. But actually there's slots on there, and I can talk about it for hours, I won't. But the point is that it has seeped into the British daily cultural life. And actually it never used to be the case. It used to be people, old men used to go to bookies or whatever. And now it's something that's hidden. Like things that online can get hidden, as we know, whether it's all kinds of vices. So I want to look at that world, but also look at taking a chance, changing your luck, the risk that one takes when you put your entire family in a boat across an ocean, all kinds of risks. So it's not just, not just about gambling, it's about the whole spectrum of risks that we can take to make our lives work. And that's the big idea for Lucky.
Wow, sounds fantastic. And you touched on the front cover. I just wanted to ask you, how do you decide that? I mean, I know the publisher is massively involved, but it's incredibly important, isn't it, to actually get people to pick it up? Like, how much say do you get in that? I've always wanted to ask an author this.
Oh,
now I've got the chance.
It's a really good question. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. I've been really lucky with Full Estate. So they're an imprint of HarperCollins, and they have some fantastic people working for them. They really do. So with Darling, I always said, here's a cover that got your hard copy, because mine come out in hardback, and then later.
Yes, because they're different, aren't they? Different covers.
Yeah. Different covers. And so I get shown it and said, if I had to say, I said, if I didn't like it, I could say, oh, actually, it's not, it's not what I was looking for. But I was really pleased with the Darling one, and I've seen the Lucky one a few weeks ago. Absolutely love it. I think it's perfect, and it needs to be necessarily different because there's different markets for hardback and paperback. But also, it's just to grab you. It's a gut feeling. You feel that feels like my book. I think so you do get a say, but they do go ahead. They don't consult. They didn't consult most authors and say, what do you think? What would you like? They go away and do it, and then you're presented with it. And then if you had an objection, I'm sure they'd listen and adapt it. But I've been lucky so far, and just lucky. I've been lucky so far, and I've been really blown away by the cover. So I'm really excited about sharing that on social.
And I'm hoping that when you can do all the lovely book tours and actually go to the festivals next summer, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Oh, I hope so. Do you know what I have to say? Whilst can't complain, but I am missing all the book launches and the parties. I keep dreaming about parties. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah, Oh my God, I've got dresses hanging there doing nothing. I'm just going to have to, I think every time I do an interview now, I did put fancy earrings on. I just want to wear them.
Yeah, I've got my little half moons.
I know. It's not good for people like ourselves who've got, we want to get out there. We want to do stuff.
We'll have to have a cocktail together.
We
of this. That'd be great.
We're not too far from each other, are we, as well,
Exactly.
in real life? So we will definitely do that. Before we finish, I wanted to ask, I love asking this question when I've done interviews before. What advice would you give your 18-year-old self? Because actually it says quite a lot about the journey that one has come on from 18.
Yeah, I think, I would say to my 18-year-old self, don't be fearful. Don't be afraid. I thought I was quite confident, but that confidence I had then it was superficial. It was nothing compared to the confidence I had as a woman in her 40s. It's so much better being in her 40s, and isn't it just? I said, don't be afraid. Yeah. I wanted more than anything in my life. There's two things I really wanted, and it's like true love and the novel, which might sound weird, but those are the things above all. And true love includes love of children as well. But I wanted family and novel, and I think that if you persevere and you're true to yourself, you really can get what you want. So I would say my advice to my 18-year-old self would be write your own life.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Rachel. This has been a pleasure. I could talk and talk and talk to you, and we will again. We'll have to have you back. I'd love to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
Good luck with the new novel, and yeah, as I say, if you haven't read Dazzling, do pick it up, and we'll look forward to the new one coming out. Thanks so much, Rachel.
Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you.